Good morning and welcome to the Yolo Basin Wetlands. My name is Randy. I work with the Yolo Basin Foundation, which does the educational aspect of the wildlife area. And today we're going to talk about one of our larger birds and one of our more successful birds. And specifically, what we're going to be talking about today is about owls. We have 4 or 5 different types of owls that are found in the wetlands. Um, they include great horned owls, which is the biggest owl in the Sacramento area. Also barn owls, burrowing owls, screech owls, and then there are a few other ones that are occasional visitors to the wildlife area. Now, owls generally are a very successful bird. And what I mean by successful is that if you go anywhere in the world and talk to any local person who knows about birds and ask him or her, do you have owls here? The answer will always be yes. The only place you would get a no is if you went to Antarctica. What we're going to talk about today is some of the adaptations that owls have that make them different from other birds and help them be successful. Now, you probably already know some things about owls, uh, and I just want to ask a few questions and have you think about what your answers might be. And the first thing that I would like to ask you is, what time of day or night do owls typically hunt? Now, your answer is probably, you already know this, that they hunt at night. And this is very important because in the daytime, there's lots of birds and other animals that are trying to eat the rodents that are the owl's main source of food. But at night, there are very, very few other birds that are able to hunt at night. So the owl has adaptations that allow it to hunt at night, and we'll talk about a few of those now. Now, the first thing about an owl's adaptations has to do with its vision. Owls have extremely good night vision. They can see when there is almost no light available. Their eyes have to be very big to allow them to do that. And in fact, their eyes are so big that they have to have a special adaptation in their skull. So I'm holding up right now a plastic model of a great horned owl's skull. And if you look here on the sides, you can see a ring. And that ring, it's a bony ring, holds the owl's eyes in place. If it was, if the owl was built in a way that it was holding its eyes in its head just with muscles, and that's how our eyes stay in our heads, it wouldn't be able to control them. Its eyes would be jiggling around like the Cookie Monsters. So these support its eyes and allow its eyes to be much bigger than in a bird that had a skull that did not have that kind of an adaptation. So one thing that you can do that owls can't is this. If you put your finger in front of your face and hold your head still and follow your finger without moving your head, you can see it go pretty far to the side. And by doing that, in order to do that, what you are doing is moving your eyes. Owls can't do that. They can't move their eyes in their head without moving their head. So they had to have a second adaptation besides the bony rings in the skull, and that is that they can turn their head not just to the side like you or I can do. They can turn their head and look completely behind themselves, and if they want, they can go another quarter of a circle and look over their opposite shoulder. Now, if you tried to do that, you'd break your neck. You have to have a neck that is built differently than ours and built differently from most other birds as well. So those are two adaptations that the owl has to have in order to allow it to be able to see at night. Now, the next thing that's important is that the owls have to be quiet when they're hunting, since they're hunting at night, and they've developed adaptations for that as well. This is an owl's wing, and one thing that is unusual about the owl's wings and the feathers on the rest of its body is that compared to other birds, it is very soft. If you had, say, a duck's wing and an owl's wing, and you closed your eyes and you felt to see which was the softer of the two, you would be able to tell it very, very easily because the owl's feathers are so much smoother and softer. And because they're smooth and soft, they go through the air without making much noise. The individual feathers have a sawtooth edge, and that again is a second adaptation that the owl has that also make its flight more quiet. Now, the last adaptation I want to talk about is the owl's hearing. And I'm going to move this over here so I can point at it. This is a mounted barn owl. It's a real owl, but it's not alive. And what I'd like you to look at is the front of the owl. You can see a ring of feathers there. That's called the facial disc. And it's yet another adaptation that the owl has, because what this does is amplify and focus sound. It's just like if you have a satellite dish for your TV, the dish is there to focus the signal that you get from the satellite. The owl's got a satellite dish, so to speak, and that allows it to be able to hear better. The other thing is that our ears, one's right across from the other pretty much. Not so with the owl's. One of its ears is down and back, and the other one is forward and up. So if you're listening for a faint noise and trying to figure out where it's coming from, you kind of, you probably turn your head this way and that to figure out where the noise is coming from. Well, the owl doesn't have to do that because the offset ears give it a much clearer picture of where something is located, where the sound is coming from. So they can hear a mouse working its way through the bushes from way up in a tree, and they'll know exactly where that mouse is. And in fact, scientists have built rooms that are completely dark, no light at all. Put an owl in there, put a mouse in there, boom, that mouse is lunch. The owls can hunt exclusively by sound. They don't have to be able to see their prey. Now, we've talked a little bit about what the owls eat, their prey, and I've been referring to mice and other rodents. And that's probably about 90% of what a barn owl will eat. Other types of owls have other favorite foods. Um, Barn owls will also eat lizards and snakes. They'll eat other birds. Uh, they'll eat big insects like grasshoppers and dragonflies. And when they catch their prey, they don't have teeth. They can't chew up their food. So what they do is swallow it whole, or if they've caught something big, like say a rabbit or a ground squirrel, they will tear it apart using their beak and their claws. But even so, they'll be swallowing it in big chunks, and they'll be swallowing it whole. So we have a chart here showing the owl's digestive system, and here's a picture of the owl swallowing the poor little mouse. The poor little mouse goes into the first stomach of the owl, where the stomach acids will dissolve the meat and the other parts of the mouse that the owl can digest. But the owl cannot digest things like bone and fur. So what happens to the bone and fur is that they go into the owl's second stomach. And in the second stomach, they'll get kind of compacted and put together, and probably a couple of times a day, a well-fed barn owl will cough up those feathers and fur, and what we call that is an owl pellet. So what we're going to do today is do a little detective investigation work and figure out what it was that an owl was eating. So you can collect these owl pellets, and if you're a scientist, and dissect them or take them apart and look at what you find, and that'll tell you a lot about what a specific owl in a specific location has been eating. And it certainly beats trying to follow an owl around in the middle of the night to see what it's catching. It's dark, it's cold, you want to be home in bed. Much easier just to go back in the daytime to where the owl has been roosting and regurgitating the owl pellets, pick them up, take those back to the lab. So we're going to do pretty much the same things that a scientist would do who's doing an investigation of the owl's diet. Okay, so now we're going to start the hands-on part of this presentation. And you've got a plate, you've got a couple of pokey sticks, and you've got an owl pellet. So the first thing you're going to do is take the owl pellet out of the aluminum foil. And these have been sanitized, so there's no way that you're going to catch any disease from this. And this is just a normal part of the owl's digestive process. It's not throw up, it's not poop, and it's perfectly safe to handle. So the first thing you probably want to do is hold it like this and take it apart, and maybe break it into a couple of pieces. Now look, you can see it already. I've found something, and this is a leg bone from a very small rodent. So you also have this chart, and this chart helps you figure out what the bone that you're looking at, which animal it came from. It might have come from a bird, it might have come from one of a number of kinds of rodents. You can see that the bones are shaped differently depending on whether it's a bird or a mole or a rodent or a shrew. Shrews are probably the smallest of the rodents that the owls eat. Moles are somewhat larger, as you can see from the picture. So as you find bones, you can take them and look to see where they match up on the chart. Now I've found a couple of leg bones here. You can see that they're different shapes because they're from different parts of the animal. If you look here at the hind legs, you can see the the, the it's shaped kind of almost like a needle with a hole. And if you look at this leg bone, you can see that same feature.
This is the skull of the mouse. These are its eye holes. All this other stuff, this is just basically fur. And then here you can see its front teeth, kind of yellow, and those are the big chewing teeth that pretty much all rodents have.
Just to sum up, owls are very interesting and unique animals. They hunt at night, unlike all of the other birds of prey. And in order to do that, they have adaptations for their vision, for their hearing, and for their flight, all of which help them be successful and be found as widely throughout the world as they are. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy continuing to dissect your owl pellet. And if you have questions, you're welcome to direct them to the Yellow Basin Foundation, and we'll be happy to answer them as well as we can. So thank you very much for joining us today.